Hi, everyone. I'm Gina Minardi, and I'm a licensed therapist who got fed up with therapy. This is a one-woman show about my journey of finding the spaces between non-traditional approaches of healing. What I learned is that there's no one right way to heal, and you truly are your best resource. Therapists and healers are meant to support you on your path, but they don't have all of the answers. You do. This show is about the spaces between laughter, tears, thoughts, ego, soul, messy growth, and moments of joy. It's about personal liberation, inner knowing, and the tools that get you there. I will cover topics that make many of us uncomfortable and interviewing people who are willing to go there. I've spent thousands of hours listening to human beings navigate their life story, from rehabs in Malibu to homeless shelters in East LA, and now my private practice. It has been some of the most profound, painful, and beautiful moments in my life. Thank you so much for joining me. Hello, friends, and welcome back to Spaces Between. Today, I'm sitting down with one of my best friends and intuitive sisters, Rachel McDonald. She's an award-winning director whose body of work spans commercials, music videos, documentaries, short films, and branded content. Rachel has written and directed multiple short films and commercials. She is currently developing a feature film based on the true story of her family during and after Hurricane Katrina. And I just love and adore this woman, as I'm sure you will. Hi, Rach. How are you?
Hi, Gina. I'm great. How are you?
Good, good. You're sitting.
That's such a kind introduction, hearing it from you. Thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. And you're in Tahoe right now.
I am.
Yes.
And my husband says to keep it an undisclosed location. Like surf spots. No, yeah, we're at our cabin in Tahoe right now, which is dreamy and really nice to be here for this conversation.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So, Rach, I'm going to start with the question that I think is so important and relevant these days. And I always wonder if I'm going to keep asking it, but yes, because I think the pandemic has had such a profound effect on all of us in the individual and the collective realm, and just, what's shaped and shifted in us emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. So for you, between 2020 to now 2022, what do you think have been some of the biggest lessons for you, and how have you shifted as a person?
Oh, gosh, that's a great question. And I can't believe it's been 2020 to 2022. I think that's a really wild part of all of this, is that I start to reflect on the years, and when I think about 2019, I've missed time. I think something during this pandemic has been that 2020 almost feels like we were all lost in time for a moment. But I guess for me, I started out the pandemic, I was, as you know, thriving in my career, and I was on a roll, and actually my relationship was going through kind of ups and downs, and I was in London right when COVID started surging around the world, when we really started learning about it in the United States, and right before everything shut down. And I was actually with my husband, D'Amato. We were there shooting a project, and we kind of escaped the country before everything shut down. And it was interesting coming back and then everything closing down, and us going from this place of being very externally driven and, focused on work, so focused on being busy and keeping this momentum, to come home and completely slow down, to just be in our home with each other, doing things like playing bananagrams and Scrabble and building puzzles. In the beginning, I remember we were doing stuff like that because it felt like none of us really knew what was going on. So almost treated it like a little vacation. and then that evolved, obviously, after months of being away from your friends and in lockdown. I mean, and then seeing you guys sick in the beginning was really traumatic and eye-opening and made us realize like the severity of the situation. But I think it slowed us down a lot. And me specifically, I went really internal during this time and softened. I feel like it softened me a lot and made me really hone in on what was important to me. And not that my career isn't important to me. I love my career very much and have missed being busy, but haven't. Don't feel the need to just be going, going, going. Like I'm okay with doing things at a slower pace and being a little more particular about what I'm taking on so that I am nurturing the things in my life that are more important, like my relationship and my friendships. And I think that really was something that came to the forefront for me was like my friendships, the friendships that were truly the ones that mattered, and my relationship with Amato, just really nurturing those, and then nurturing kind of this softer side of myself that was okay, slowing down and being more in the moment of where we were, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, all these words that you just used, the externally driven, so focused on work, keeping this momentum, to then shifting and moving to slowing down, going into this deep internal space and softening, which then sort of, I think for so many of us, blossomed really this beautiful space of the richness and depth of our relationships. And I think for a lot of people, brought so much to be worked on as well in relationships. And just as you said, with you and your husband Amato, really, you guys getting deeper into the trenches of doing deep work. And I also equally, I know you know this on a personal level, it has just been, and I even, in 2022, it continues to be this time where I don't know if you feel this way, but I still have moments where the old part of me that want to hustle or be hyper productive, I really still have to go, nope, this hasn't been the lesson of it all, Gina. And just continuing with things that keep me in a slow tempo and keep me in the spaces of softening and slowing down. But I still find, I don't know if you do, maybe it's happening more naturally. I still find it's effortful to kind of stay at that pace of slowness and softening. What have you found with that?
I mean, for sure, right? Because that's more mindful. And that's what I feel like something you're incredible at with meditation practice and this new life that you have in Ojai. And I mean, being mindful, I think, takes more effort than just being busy and staying in the hustle. It's almost easier to be that way because you're not having to slow down and reflect as much, I guess. It's easy to be distracted when you're just going as fast as you can and, burning the candle at both ends, which, look, we're good at it. Like we thrive I think both of us thrive under pressure. We thrive with juggling multiple things at the same time. And so, yes, I do think it is still effortful to slow down, be present, be mindful of your relationships. And by the way, we were talking about my husband, but the audiences know he wasn't my husband prior to the pandemic. He was my partner, and during the pandemic, we got engaged at the end of 2020. But that also is just something worth mentioning. 2020 for us, deep, work together, and but it was also more focused time together. We spent so much time, and I think you've probably gone through this in your relationship too. I'm so individualistic, and I have all these things that I want to do and work, and so I was traveling all the time. We spent a lot of time apart for a majority of our relationship, and then the year that we spent the most time together was the most beautiful time for our relationship. It really blossomed. It really showed us what was important. And we really had to work through things by communicating in a way that maybe we weren't doing before, when you could just avoid it if you were out of town or, on a project. But that COVID lockdown really put your mirror up to each other and created created this space of like, you're either going to talk about this and work through it, or like it's, I think a lot of people, it was make or break during the pandemic.
Yeah. I would say, Jonas and I absolutely went through the deepest shifts in our relationship, and some of the hardest, but the most profound for sure. And the level of intimacy, I would say, to your point, after these 2 years of, we were just saying it the other day. In our life in LA before, it was, I had an office, I was working at rehabs, I was doing happy hours. He was doing a similar thing. So, just not being, but now when this is slowed us to the point, and all of us are much more at home and with our humans. And so, it brings about the opportunity to do the deep work, which is it's been amazing, but hard, and all things. Yeah. But which brings me to Rach, you and I, so I'll just tell the audience, you and I spent some time at your cabin in Tahoe, and it was such a profound, I would say, you and I were in this vortex of talking about the collective in regards to women and the deep wounds of the collective with women and the feminine divine. And I would love if you could talk about, because I have really seen the shift in you in regards to the divine feminine and you embodying that more. How do you think that has transitioned for you also in these last few years?
Oh my gosh. It's so funny that you brought up Tahoe, because I was thinking, how am I going to go on Gina's podcast and it not turn into the vortex that we were in Tahoe, and how keep my thoughts succinct, because you and I can just go all over the place. But that was such a beautiful time. And I felt like I was floating sometimes when we got really deep into our conversations about the divine feminine and the collective and the purge that we were talking about. It was all just, it was very Gigi and witchy, and it was great. So I think it was a great question. And it's something that I have been learning so much about. And Gina, I have to tell you, I don't know if you remember this, but in 2019, this is where kind of the journey around the divine feminine for me started, which was at your women's workshop. That was 2019, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And it came up with you and Angelica for me in the sessions about the divine feminine, and that being really important to me and the women in my life. And I was kind of sitting in the women's workshop, not wanting to be ridiculous and say, I don't know what the hell the divine feminine is. I feel like I know what that is, but I don't. And I sort of went on my own journey of understanding what that is. And what I've realized over the last few years is that I think it is something that has been innately in me, and something that I've been actually exposed to for my entire life without even knowing it. And I think it's how we tap into it that is what's so beautiful and interesting. But for me, it goes back to what I've realized is that it goes back to my childhood with my grandmother, who was this woman who was raised in New Orleans by a single mom. Her father died in the war. It was after the Great Depression. Her mother was hustling to take care of these two young girls. And my grandmother was always this feminine representation of strength, but softness to me. And she was someone who I really looked up to. Well, she had a really incredible relationship with the Virgin Mary. And, as much as I've pushed away from the Catholic Church and my upbringing in the Catholic Church and Catholic schools, not that I reject all of that, but I have a different belief system, and And I've definitely separated myself from that. But now I look at it and go, wow, I was being exposed to a sacred feminine representation at a young age through the Virgin Mary. And I think all of the religions in the world have some goddess representation or some spiritual feminine person, idol, goddess that they honor. Mm-hmm. I just didn't look at it that way when I was growing up, but I did see something very special about the Virgin Mary. And I think part of that was because my grandmother had this relationship with her. So it's interesting to recognize that now. I think reading The Dance of the Dissident Daughter also opened up a lot for me regarding that. She was Christian, and she went on a journey to understand the patriarchy of Christianity, and that kind of blew the lid off for me too. I was going, oh my gosh, my entire life I've referred to God as him. Mm-hmm. And, so I think there's two different aspects of it. There's this aspect of the divine feminine being represented by a goddess or an icon or, an actual spiritual feminine being. But then there's like the divine feminine, what I'm learning, that is the qualities inside us that are softer. So the nurturing qualities, the intuition. And I think that that's something that I have followed my entire life is my intuition. I've kind of really relied on my heart and my intuition to get me through everything. It's how I got to California. It's how I got to become a director. And I even use that intuition when I'm on set directing. But I think one of the things I've realized, and you and I think are similar in this way, is I've had a lot of masculine energy. I have masculine energy. And when I was younger, I always thought like, oh, I grew up with all boys. I had to be tough to keep up with them. I had 2 brothers. All my cousins that lived close to me were boys. And I was always trying to be tough to keep up with them. And then as I became a teenager and even in my early 20s, I always saw myself as a guy's girl. And I felt like I had more of a connection with guys than I did with girls, even though I've always had great girlfriends. But as I've gotten older and in my late 20s and now in my 30s, it is my relationships with women that are so important to me and that I cherish. And I have softened and I have become much more comfortable, especially in the last few years, with that softer side and with being vulnerable. And I've always been following that intuition, but with being okay letting people know that, or and just honing in on those more sensitive, nurturing relationships with the women in my life. And what's funny is when I even look at the men in my life who I am close to now at this phase of my life, they're tender. They're guys that have divine feminine energy. Mm-hmm. They are softer in ways and open. So I don't know if that answers the question. I feel like I went all over the world, but
no, you absolutely did not. And I want everybody to know, so Rachie and I, we are not on a video call. We're on an actual phone call because of her being out in Tahoe. So that's why we were like, oh, I jumped on you and I apologize for that. But no, you absolutely answered. And I think it's really super interesting when you brought up the goddess representation and the Virgin Mary, and reading, you and I both read the Dance of the Dissident Daughter. And wow, how clear it became to me that we just, as women, we've just been snuffed out. We've been, we've been snuffed out of religious texts. We are represented as whores or less than. And to all of your points in embodying this divine feminine, it is looking at those qualities of the intuition and the softness and operating from the heart. And interestingly enough, I had a dinner with some girlfriends the other night. And to your point, all of us, all the things that you said, we all related to this element of being more masculine or being a guy's girl, and really it being this kind of incredible and also uncomfortable journey of opening up to the softer parts of us, or opening up. And we all talked about, and I would be curious your thoughts on this, really being able to be supported and really being able to receive. So, Rachel, can you talk a little bit about your journey with feeling as a woman really being supported and learning how to receive from others? Do you think that's been easier for you in your kind of journey of the feminine divine?
That's an interesting question. Let's see. Well, it's interesting. I chose a career in an industry that is incredibly masculine, and until recently, I feel like female directors weren't celebrated as much. There weren't as many female directors in the industry. But what I've found working in this very masculine field is that I've really, over the last few years, gravitated to women on my crew who I feel supported by, also men. I feel like the men and the women I surround myself with on my sets are people and individuals who respect and honor who I am as a person and a director. So I do bring that softer, intuitive side on set. I am very focused, and I think I can be sharp and strong on set, because you have to be as a leader, which is something you were talking about. You and your friends at the dinner table are all leaders. So how do you soften and receive support? I think that's one beautiful thing about filmmaking, is that you have to be supported. As a director, you're there with your vision and your ideas, and you're trying to tell a story and bring this whole world to fruition, but you cannot do it without your entire crew. And everyone on the crew brings something unique to the table, and every department is working towards your vision. And so innately you have to be supported on a film set. So at work, I feel it that way. And then I think I feel, again, it's come with age and time. It's the people in my life. I feel like probably in my younger 20s and late 20s even, I wasn't as surrounded by the beautiful, powerful women that I am now. I was some, but now I feel like I have this circle of, goddesses around me who support me and who I can be comfortable being very vulnerable with. So
yeah, I mean, what I'm hearing from you, I want to piggyback on a couple of things, but bringing all parts of yourself. And I think also something that, I want people to know as we're talking about the feminine divine is it's no short of powerful. So even when you're talking about your crew and this space of there being this honoring of intuition and softness and the heart, but also, feminine divine energy is a force, right? I mean, I really think of the birthing energy of the world, really, and of humanity. And so honoring that within your workspace. And which brings me to, I want to keep talking about this, but I also think, Rachel, your story of becoming a director is beautiful. And I think, if you would be okay talking about where you grew up, what your family system was like, and what led you to directing, because I think you're a powerhouse, and I think it would be wonderful for other people to hear your story.
Oh, okay. That's a big topic.
I know,
family, career. No.
You don't have to hit all of it, please.
Yeah. I'll just try to keep it concise. Let me see. I grew up in a small, sleepy beach town in Mississippi. A lot of people don't even know that there is a beach in Mississippi, but I grew up there in a little town called Pass Christian, of like population 5,000 before Hurricane Katrina, and it shrunk after. Middle class family, Catholic education, Catholic schools, parents who did not get along and had a really volatile relationship. So that's something that probably a younger version of me wouldn't even be able to talk about today. But I'm currently writing a script about my family and our journey, which also involves how I became a filmmaker. But so that's kind of my childhood. I grew up in it was a pretty idyllic little town, always longing for something outside of Mississippi, but wasn't sure what that was. Didn't have a lot of exposure to travel at a young age, young age, not even until I was 20 did I really start traveling. My parents didn't leave the South, but I was always kind of in my heart searching for something else. And when I was a junior in college, I decided to go visit my uncle, who was sort of my window to the world. And you have met him, my Uncle Patrick, who was with us in Costa Rica.
Yes.
He was working in the Peace Corps when I was a young child. And my grandmother used to show me on the map that he was in Tunisia, Africa. And so that was also part of my like curiosity was, what is Patrick doing? And so when I was a junior, I actually went to college in Mississippi. I can't believe I stayed in Mississippi for college, but I did. And at some point, it was like something just clicked, and I was going, what the hell am I doing? I need to go. And I wrote to Uncle Patrick, and I asked him if I could come visit him. It was 2004. It wasn't like the best time in the Middle East as far as, the United States felt about it. So my parents were completely up in arms and furious that I was going to live in Amman, Jordan for the summer. But I did. And so I went over to Jordan, and on the way I stopped in Egypt. And Gina, this is my first time really leaving the South. I had been to New York, but I went from Mississippi to the Nile, and it was completely life-changing. It was like the world just opened up to me, and this limited kind of existence of life in Mississippi was expanded in a way that I couldn't even have imagined. I mean, I was sitting at a table with veiled women and men smoking hookah pipes and looking at the pyramids in my first night in Cairo. And I still have the journal entry I wrote that night. And I mean, I was so wide-eyed and bushy-tailed. I was just like, oh my God, travel is the most amazing thing. And I was crying while writing this entry, just talking about different people of the world and how amazing it is to be so out of my comfort zone and to feel so excited and inspired by the people I talk to on the plane and the people that I'm meeting in Egypt. And anyway, that was the beginning for me. And then I came back to Mississippi and took every liberal professor I could find on my campus in a pretty conservative school. And I got into acting and theater and television production. I was a communications major, and we didn't have a film school. But when I came back from the Middle East, I just got into the arts. And it's just so interesting, like the creative energy that kind of unfolded. And for whatever reason, I got cast in like the main play with all of the thespians who had been in the theater program all through, their 4 years of undergrad. And it was my first time getting into theater. But Gina, my acting class, was my first dose of therapy. It was the first time that I focused on my breathing. It was the first time that I did a body scan. It was the first time that I went really internal in a very mindful way, and then played the part of another person's psyche. And I fell in love with what actors do, how that made me feel. But then what I really fell in love with was when I was doing this play, which all of my friends who came to watch the play, all of my guy friends in college, after they saw the play, I said, what did you think? And they were like, all Southern guys. I feel like I was sitting in a coffee shop with a bunch of liberals. And I think back on that now and I just laugh because they must all think I'm like this drum beating hippie out in California now. But anyway, what I fell in love with in that process was the breaking down of the characters and the direction from our theater director. And so I was in Mississippi going, I'm going to California and I'm going to be a director. I didn't totally know what that meant as far as motion pictures go, but I felt like that was what I wanted to do. Everything that I did in school behind the camera I really loved. And though I loved the process of acting when I did it there, it wasn't what was really calling me. I wanted to work with actors, but it gave me a real appreciation for actors and their craft. But then I was graduating college and I said, I'm packing up my car and I'm moving to California. But before I did that, this is going back to like following your intuition. I just had this feeling that I needed to go back to the Middle East and I needed to do something outside of the United States before moving to California. And I reached out to my supervisor that I volunteered for and interned with the summer before and said, hey, I would really love to go back to the Middle East. Is there anything, are there any opportunities? I'll volunteer, I'll intern, whatever. And I got this opportunity to go be a writing intern in Egypt, in Cairo, and I jumped on it. So a couple weeks after graduating college, I moved to Egypt, and it's a place you need to go, especially for all of your woo-woo spiritual energy. That place is surging with energy. I loved it. I fell in love with Egypt. I probably would have stayed a long time, but my family got hit by Hurricane Katrina and we lost our home. And I didn't know if they were alive for 6 days. And that's the script that I'm writing right now. And that incident brought me back to Mississippi, pulled me out of this little universe I was in Egypt, where I was kind of following my heart and exploring this other life outside of the South. And it pulled me back to the South. And again, it was following my heart. I went home and I was like, I can't not be here for my family right now. We've all kind of gone through the most traumatic experience of our lives. And thankfully, everyone was alive, but it was devastating. So I came home to be with my family with the plan, again, of going to California. I said, I'll spend 6 months in Mississippi, and then I will pack my bags and move to California. And while I was home, I got an opportunity from a friend from college to work on a movie in Louisiana that was shooting there. And I mean, she wrote me, and I had written her months before asking if there were any opportunities, and she kind of blew it off, was like dealing with Hurricane Katrina and didn't want to talk about the film industry. Well, she reached out to me when I was home in Mississippi with my family and said, my husband or my boyfriend is looking for production assistants for a movie that's coming to town. And Gina, I was like in New Orleans the next day interviewing with her boyfriend going, I've never been on a movie set. I'm super smart. I'm super like fast learner. Please hire me. And he hired me, and it ended up being Frank Darabont directed a film called The Mist. Frank Darabont directed The Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile. He's an amazing filmmaker. And he was the first person I got to learn from and became a bit of a mentor to me, and is how I got to California. So it came full circle. And I think that was what I was going to talk about earlier when I said I didn't realize my entire life that I was tapping into some of that divine feminine, which is the creative energy, the life-giving energy, the intuition. But like I was tapping into that by following it. All of these steps. I didn't necessarily want to be living in Mississippi, but my heart was like, you have to be with your family right now. And then that led me to the dream of being a director. And yeah, so that carried me to California, and I just busted my butt for 10 years working for other directors and being a production assistant on set, producing little things here and there, and then just started directing.
I really do want to highlight, though, you're such a beautiful example, and I think to anybody listening, of following signs and synchronicities, really tapping into your intuition and following the heart. But there was also, you took a lot of risks and you took action in your life to get to the spaces that you did, which I think in the sort of new age world now, and when people talk about manifesting or creating the dreams that they want, there's so much in just write it down or create a vision board and it's going to become something, which I'm not going to argue that it can't. But when I listen to you, it's the really beautiful balance of trusting yourself, trusting your gut and your connection, for lack of better words, to God. But also taking big leaps in your life. Like that's a huge move for a young woman who's grown up in the South to go, okay, I'm moving to the Middle East. And, that's massive. And that's a huge, and for someone who hadn't traveled and experienced anything else in the world, I've always been so impressed by that with you, Rachel. And you continue to in your life
Ah,
make
thanks,
huge risks.
Gina.
And which actually, I mean, this might feel like a quick digression into the next question,
Uh-huh.
but I think, when you and I have talked about your pregnancy and birth, which I know, and for me,
Mhm.
watching you and watching the profound shift in Rachel, the
Mhm.
softening, the deeper intuition, really embodying your power, particularly as you and I talked about, your natural birth. And I want to make a disclaimer as we talk about this. This isn't Rachel and I saying like one way is better versus another in how you approach giving birth to a human. But I definitely, when listening to you about it, again, you really you set yourself up along the way. You were incredibly intentional, and you were praying. But again, it was this beautiful balance of watching someone who was taking the steps and the action to want to have a natural birth and really getting to the space to be in your power, but also letting yourself be guided and letting yourself surrender to the divine. And yeah,
Mm.
wow, it was powerful listening to you. So I know that was a lot, but if you could talk about a bit, just your journey of whether pregnancy or giving birth and embodying really the divine, because I think that's what you did.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, sure. I'm happy to talk about it. I'm just going to go back, though, to one thing you said about
Yeah.
taking action.
Mhm.
There's this quote I used to keep with me all the time, and it was talk doesn't cook the rice. And so, as we're sitting here talking about all these things, and it could come across as, very new age or all super spiritual, I'm a very action oriented person. So I appreciate you pointing that out too. And I do think it's applicable to what we're about to talk about as far as my birth goes and my journey with pregnancy, because it did involve a lot of prayer and a lot of like inner work, but it was also taking action and planning and preparing for the birth that I had that I was super excited about. But yeah, talk doesn't cook the rice. I just love that.
I
And
love that so much.
yeah, it was always kind of with me. Like, yeah, you can have all these great dreams and you can write it all down in your journal or on your mood board, but if you're not taking the steps, it's not going to happen. So anyway, okay, my pregnancy. Well, as you know, I was told by doctors that I didn't have a lot of time to have a baby and that I should start trying right away. And anyway, Amato and I were in the place that we wanted to start a family. I was a little nervous in the beginning. I thought it was could take a long time because the doctors told me that I just had like a limited, I don't know how much we want to get into this, but my egg reserve was low. So I took a spiritual approach to that and a physical one. I started, seeing an acupuncturist and taking herbs, but then also kind of manifesting and inviting this soul to come into our lives. And we were spending a lot of time up at our cabin then too, which for me, and I know for you, being connected to nature is one of the places that I find myself softening the most. I find myself so grounded and inspired and happy, really. So was spending a lot of time up here, got pregnant in just a couple months, which was very fortunate naturally. And then the journey began as being pregnant. And I think I told you I read this book that I just loved called 10 Moons, and it was the spiritual journey of pregnancy and how, as a woman, you're going from maiden to mother. And it's this really big transition in life and how important it is and how beautiful it can be. Oh, and the reason it's 10 moons is because prior to, when Indigenous women and Native women were having babies, they knew when they were going to have their baby based on the cycles of the moon. So 10 moons from their last period was when they were going to give birth. And I've always also felt a real love and connection to the moon cycles. And anyway, so I loved this book. I really sunk into that. And then I did a lot of reading, but I didn't want to like oversaturate myself. I feel like there are so many birth stories. I did listen to quite a few. There are so many podcasts and books and blogs, and there's just which is all beautiful information to have. I just didn't want to overwhelm myself. So I took bits and pieces, but I really learned about the medical system and birth in this country. And even talking to my family, I mean, I learned so much being pregnant about the way that I grew up and how birth is really looked at as this not inconvenience, but it's just like this, it's just a medical condition that kind of needs to be treated in a lot of places in this country. It's like cesareans, interventions, and instead of really honoring and celebrating that women have been doing this for all of time and that our bodies are designed to bring babies into the world. So I am not anti-Western medicine. I'm very grateful for Western medicine. And the way I approached it was from a space of being open. I really want to have a natural birth, an unmedicated birth, but I wanted to have it in a hospital because I do believe in Western medicine. And if for any reason there was an emergency and an intervention needed to happen, I wanted to be in the right place to do that. So I approached my pregnancy knowing that and staying open-minded that, okay, here's what I want. And I manifested it. And I had birth affirmations, and I had little Post-it notes all over our house that said, my birth will be gentle. My birth will be calm. I can't wait to welcome my baby into the world. These kinds of things to just stay really positive and stay out of the fear, because I do think there's a lot of fear around birth, because in films and in a lot of the stories we hear, it's traumatic and it's incredibly painful and it's screaming and it's bloody and it's all of these things. It is those things. It is freaking painful and there's screaming, but it's also can be really, really beautiful and calm and gentle. And so I hired an amazing doula, and Amato and Jill is my doula, and I all just really got on the same page about how we wanted to approach my birth. And I just kept, I kept the positive story alive throughout my pregnancy and stayed really hopeful to that. And again, just tried to put the fear out, but also wasn't being rigid. I knew if something happened that I wasn't going to resist an intervention that I really needed to help bring Louis, my son, into the world. So there's that. I don't know if you want me to tell you about the birth or.
Well, that's totally up to you. All these things that you brought up, I just, again, want to reiterate this idea of honoring the design and the intelligence of our bodies and the power of our bodies. And that there's been so much fear kind of, I would almost say, propagated around births and natural births. And that, but again, I know this is I want to be so careful and delicate, because I've had many friends who have also gone in with a really sincere birthing plan, and then their birthing plan just kind of gets ripped out from under them and a C-section has to happen, or the epidural. And so again, I think Rachel and I both really honoring that, but I think it's also important to honor that we are powerful. And I did a few episodes back, I talked about embodiment. And really, I wish I would have had just you on talking, because you embodied and you were with your pain. So maybe you don't have to go into all the details unless you wanted to. I mean, I'm open to anything and everything. That, but you really, I think I was even saying it to Jamie last night, because she was asking, and I said, I think Rachel, she went in with the intention. And again, you can get so blasted, I'm sure, by the level of pain, but learning how to be with it. And I remember you saying, I don't want to go into your story, but it was so powerful when you said the doula, when you were going, no, I'll let you tell it.
Yes.
Yes.
That's a great part of the story. I also I feel I have to reiterate what you said, because look, I'm a first time mom. I've only been through one birth, and I'm just very, very fortunate that I ended up having the birth that I wanted. I one of my best girlfriends gave birth a few weeks before me, and she had a birth plan very similar to mine, and she had to have a cesarean, and she still had a beautiful birth and has this perfect little son, and they have this incredible bond. And, you know, I I went into it also knowing, because many people told me, yeah, okay, have a birth plan, but it's going to go right out the window.
Yeah.
And I would even say that to Amato as we put our birth plan together. I was like, this is what I hope and what I want. And he kept saying, but we know that it might not happen. And, you know, there's that reality, and there's nothing wrong with it. And there's also no shame in having an epidural or in having a cesarean. I mean, I have no judgment against any way that any woman wants to bring her baby into the world. I just specifically really had this intention, and it wasn't how I was brought into the world. I was a cesarean, and I wasn't breastfed, and you know, so my journey is very different than the way that I came into the world. And same with Amato, he was also brought into the world by a cesarean. So we have gratitude for that too. But I'll tell you about my birth. First of all, I think that my water breaking is hilarious, so I'm just going to tell it on a podcast that I don't know who's going to hear. But the morning of that I went into labor, I went on a hike with my dear friend Millie and Amato and our dogs, and I was massive and ready to pop. I was 8 days before my due date. And we did we did the LMU hike. We did our, you know, the hike you and I used to do with Lou and Huck. And it was really hot that day. And afterwards we went to the tasting kitchen, which is hilarious because I feel like I used to go hang out there when I was single, and it was like where we go in the neighborhood to have drinks. And here I am sitting at the tasting kitchen having brunch, and all of a sudden there's like a waterfall happening beneath me. And I was like looking at Amato and Millie going, well, something's happening and I'm not peeing myself. So they were like, oh my God, your water's breaking. Anyway, it was just hysterical because I had been told that when your water breaks, sometimes you don't even know, or that it can be like a trickle, or, you know, and here I am just like floodgates at one of my favorite old restaurants. So it was just comedic. And so we started the day like that with a little bit of humor. So we called Jill, our doula. We went home, had music, and we're crazy about lighting anyways because of what we do for a living. So we had our lights dim and everything was really vibey and beautiful in our house. And I baked for the nurses before I started having contractions. I did that to sort of distract myself and do something that I love, and to have a treat to, you know, persuade the nurses to be nice to me. And so I did that for a little while. Jill came over. She's awesome. She kind of sat on our front porch and read a book and gave us our space. And then like maybe 3 or 4 hours after my water broke, I started having contractions, and we labored at home for a few hours, and it got intense pretty quickly. But what you were saying about pain and embodiment, I knew that it was going to be painful. I wasn't going into it going, oh, labor is, you know, super chill as long as you meditate through it. I knew that there was going to be pain and that I was going to have to lean into it. And I did, with Jill's help and Amato's help. And obviously breath is such a powerful, powerful thing. And I used my breath, and I really used my mind in a meditative way. Like I definitely meditated through some of those contractions with breath work and intention until I couldn't take it anymore. And then we drove to the hospital when I was like, you know, my contractions were super close. I was hunched over in the back of the car. It was like a scene in a movie. It was hilarious. Anyway, we got to the hospital, and when we got into the room, there was a nurse who oh my God, should I say this on a podcast? I just wasn't comfortable with her. And this is where, when you're in labor, you go into such a primal place. It's like you become so much more animalistic and tapped into that part of your womanhood that is really unique and interesting. But in that moment, I also felt my gut and my instinct telling me that this person wasn't like the right person for me. She was kind of rude when we came in. She was very cold. She asked me if I thought I was in labor. We were like moaning through contractions. This is one of those moments where I think staying empowered is important for any woman giving birth. I think one of the things that we do, nothing against the medical industry, but I feel like so often we like give up our power. And as a woman who's in touch with your body and knows what's going on, we just say, oh, whatever you think is best, or, well, the doctor knows best, or the nurse is, I just need to listen to whatever she says. And I just didn't feel that she was the right fit for me to be able to have a natural birth. And it was probably the best thing I did. When we got to the hospital, I looked at Jill and I said, I don't want her to be our nurse. And that was an interesting thing to do, because I think a lot of times there's a little bit of, you feel uncomfortable, right, in life in general, when something isn't the right fit and you need to change it, but you almost feel guilty trying to change something or asking for that. There's this feeling of, well, just go with the status quo, just stick with what is being put forward. Anyway, Jill goes out. She talks to the head nurse. She comes back in, and my friendly nurse was like gloving up, ready to do an exam. And I'm going, oh my God, what's happening? And then, Jill stopped her and said, you know what, can you just give us a moment of privacy? Which was an amazing, intervention on Jill's part. The nurse left. Another nurse came in, Victoria, and I called her Victorious because she became like team Louie, and she was just such a part of it with us, and was really respectful of my birth plan and what we wanted. So I labored like a wild animal all over this hospital room, and ended up pushing for 4.5 hours, which is, as many women know, a really intense time to be pushing. And that's when I went to the deepest spiritual place, Gina, and was really, really powerful. I prayed to my grandmother, who had 8 children and who's the woman I was talking about earlier. And I talked to Louie in my heart. I mean, in between every contraction, I would collapse basically, and I would just go internal. And that's what I was doing. I was just praying and talking to Louie, telling him I was ready to meet him, telling him on his own time, but encouraging him that we could do it together, and then praying to my grandmother and all of the women who have gone before me. I was just thinking about the collective of women around the entire world now and before who have done this, and calling on that strength. Yeah. And that ultimately is at the end there when Louie came out. I think I told you, well, let me talk about Jill. The pain, when the pain got to the maximum, I was never asking for drugs, which I was proud of myself for, but I was saying, no, 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 no. And every time the contraction came, I was saying no. And Jill looked at me and said, we're going to start saying yes. And I love her for that. And it was a switch. And the next contraction came and I started to go, yes, 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 yes. And for the rest of my labor, I was doing that. Yes, yes, yes. And, it's amazing what saying yes versus no can do. And anyway, yes, yesing my way to Louie coming into the world. When he came out of my body, I think I told you it was like something I have never experienced or could imagine experiencing, I guess. It was like I was shooting through the cosmos or out of my body with him. And it was wild and a rush and amazing. And then they put him on me. And I think I told you this little boy this little old soul locked eyes with me the moment they laid him on my chest. And it was transcendent. I could not believe that I was looking into these eyes of this little baby and connecting with him again, but now, outside of the womb. And so it was a really, really beautiful birth in a hospital.
Yeah.
And I would do it again and again and again, because I think it's, as a woman, one of the most incredible experiences you can go through. I don't know that I will get to do it again, but I would go through the pain again and again for that experience.
I mean, so many of the things that you talked about, the first one I want to go back to, which was really truly honoring your needs when you didn't align with the energy of the nurse, which I think typically for women, and we do, even when we are empowered, we can still kind of do this dance of like, oh, is it rude to like say
Right.
she needs to go? And like, am I being a bad person? But you were just like, nah, you got to go. This is not going to work for the energy of what I'm about. I mean, talk about stepping into a vortex. You're about to go into the most primal space that you can blast into. And so you chose in that moment, like, I can't have this energy. And I also can't feel guilty or bad about it, which I really want to honor that piece of knowing what you needed. And then going into this space, using your words of, laboring like a wild animal, but within that animalistic part of you, also tapping into your ancestors, which I think we're not taught in life, and not even necessarily, I mean, certainly in some religions, but many people who do ayahuasca ceremonies, or you don't have to do ayahuasca ceremonies to see your ancestors, but knowing that we are supported and guided and trusting in that. And so everything you just said to me about, you prayed to your grandmother, you talked to Louie, you would collapse and then say, I'm ready to meet you. But you continued praying to all these women and calling on that strength. And I mean, I remember the first time you told me that story, and I just went, oh, you had a whole team of spirits with you. And yeah, that is just like, wow. Sorry, you were going to say something.
No, I love that you said that, because Jill said the same thing when I talked to her after the birth, because we kind of regrouped a few days later just to talk about everything, and she said, we were so supported by spirit in that room. I felt it. And that was so powerful for me to hear that she felt that too. Amato said the same thing. And I think I also told you, just going back to my grandmother, that Louis came 8 days early on my mother's birthday, and my mother is the oldest of 8. So 68 years apart, I was giving birth on the same day that my grandmother gave birth to her first child. And that rocked me when I realized it. I mean, I knew he was born on my mother's birthday, but it was like when I really thought about that my grandmother 68 years earlier was going through the same thing I was going through, and she was who I was calling on so much during that labor.
Yeah.
It just really
profound,
resonated. Yeah.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Well, I don't want to take so much of your time, Rach, but could you just speak for, as much as you want to, about how motherhood has shifted you?
Best experience of my life, best honor and gift of my life. I mean, I know all parents say this. It's like, you don't know until you have a child how powerful and profound it is. It's so true. And Louis has just made me, oh gosh, the softest version of myself by far. And he's made me so, 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 so present and so aware of life and how beautiful life is and how fragile and precious life is. He's made me prioritize in a really interesting way. Amato has joked that, if I haven't left Louis much, he'll be 10 weeks. Oh, he's 10 weeks old today. Today's Monday. He's 10 weeks old. I haven't really left him much at all, but like I had to run to the pharmacy once, or I can't remember what else I had to do. And my timing for someone who could, window shop for hours, or it's like I am in and out, and my decisiveness is next level. Motto is like when it comes to, I think you and I hate the discussions of like, what's for dinner? What do you want for dinner? Where do you want to eat with our men? And it's just like, I want this, or no, I don't want that. And he has made me really prioritize and be decisive, because it's like, I don't want to waste a minute when I could be spending that time with him, watching him grow and watching him take in the world. And when you watch a little baby see things for the first time, though I don't think it's his first time, he definitely feels like an old soul, but it's his first time in this life. And when he looks at things for the first time, like the snow the other day when we got here, his wide eyes, it melts me, and it reminds me to cherish this earth and this life. And yeah, I just think he's made me very present and aware and more in love than I have ever felt.
I love you, Louie.
And
so much.
It's so funny because, you know how much I love directing, and I really love my job, but there have been moments where I'm looking at a motto going, how the hell am I ever going to do it again? And it's still just early days, of course, because he's so young. But I do think when I do get back into it, I think he is making me a better storyteller already, because I've been a lot more honest with myself recently and with him since he's been in the world. And that I have been writing my script about my family. And I have my relationship with my mother can be a very difficult one. I love her dearly, but we have a difficult relationship. And she was out here for a month, and she's a big character in this film. And just in the last week being up here writing, I just feel like I'm less apologetic about the truth and not afraid to go to those places. And I think that's a really interesting thing that Louis has brought out of me.
Ooh, well, I mean, I just want to say, I think that we will end on that note, because that just so beautifully brings us into the feminine divine, which is you're unapologetic with your truth and standing in your truth. And that's I was just texting a good girlfriend about, I've made an oath to myself this year to be radically honest every day. And it's really interesting because I think, you know this about me, and I liken myself to be a very honest human, but every day when you think of even the little like white lies or ways that we kind of edge things to make somebody more comfortable, or, for you writing this story about your family, it's got to be really confronting that you go, oh, maybe I could really hurt someone, or there's going to be pushback, but needing to just stay radically honest. And that is, again, I think it is one of the biggest healers in the world, is staying in your truth. So,
oh, for sure. It's cathartic, and it's a reckoning, but it's cathartic.
It is. That was a beautiful word. It is a reckoning for sure. So I'm just going to hit you, if you're okay with this. You don't have to overthink these questions. These are just Gina's little funny rapid fire. Well, they throw
game. I like this.
Yes. My friend Jory was like, oh, they're not that lighthearted, Gina. But so, okay.
Oh, Jory.
Yes. Oh, Jory. So, okay. First one. Do you think you're more of a Beyonce or Rihanna woman?
Ooh, Beyonce.
Okay.
I wish. I wish.
We'll just leave it at that. Beyonce woman. Okay.
Wait, I want to tell you one thing about Beyonce, though.
Yes,
My
yes.
pump me up song on the way to set when I'm on a job is Beyonce. Oh God, now I'm can't remember the song right now because I'm crazy.
I bet you while I ask you the other questions, the song will come to you.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll come back to the song, or I'll try to remember it. Okay, so next one. Why do you think that we're here as humans on this planet? And why are you?
Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
Whew, really lighthearted question,
I
Gina.
know. Sorry, these are really good.
I'm going to agree with Jory on that one. Gosh, why do I think we're here as humans? I mean, I would love to believe that we are here to cultivate love and kindness to humanity and to all beings. I would love to believe that that's what we were here for, is to care for each other and to care for this earth. Though I think we're getting further and further. A lot of society takes us further and further from that. But yeah, I think my idealistic self would like to believe that we're here to create and cultivate love and take care of humanity and this earth.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with your statement for sure.
Hold Up is the Beyonce song.
I knew it, and it was on the tip of my tongue. Okay, yes. That's such a good one to get pumped up. I'm trying to think what mine is. Oh, doesn't matter. It'll come to me later. Okay, so next question. What do you think happens after death?
Ooh, that's changed a lot in my life. I mentioned earlier, I grew up very Catholic, and it was, I really believed in heaven or hell. And in fact, when my mom was just out here for Christmas, she brought up hell in a motto, and I kind of laughed. I'm like, I don't believe in hell, which she was kind of appalled that what do you mean you don't believe in hell? And I was like, I don't know, Mom, I just don't believe in that. But after death, I think that there are other lives. I think that our souls go on. I love something that you told me that I really hold on to is soul tribes. I think of an innocent childhood version of that when I was little was that I thought in heaven I would be with my grandmother again, and I would be with my loved ones. And I think now what I believe is that some of those souls that have been in this life will be in another life with me in another form. So yeah, I believe in reincarnation and other lives.
Yeah. And definitely our soul tribe, and that you and we will keep traveling together is my hope.
I hope so.
I hope so. Okay, lastly, which I think actually you're the very first guest who has already answered this within the interview, which is a motto, a quote, a motto that someone has said to you over the years that stuck. And you did say earlier, talk doesn't cook the rice, which I think is amazing. But if there's another one that you feel that resonates with you more.
I have another one. I love talk doesn't cook the rice. I also love that comparison is the thief of joy.
Oh God, it is. Oh,
and in the world that we live in with social media, and I feel sad for younger generations who have only known social media. I'm so grateful that we grew up before smartphones and social media. I mean, I'm aging us a little bit, but obviously we're a part of it now, but I like that I have the memory of the time before that. And I really work to have a healthy balance with that stuff. But I do think comparison is the thief of joy.
I would agree with you 100%. And I think social media has only exacerbated this. And it's why, I mean, you know this about me, but it's why each time I go on and I'm just like, does this bring me any joy? I don't think so. But
yeah,
I won't end on that full black and whiteness. I know it's a larger discussion, but yeah. It's a big one. So, Rachie, thank you for coming on today. I love you. You're such a wise soul. And is there anything for people to look for you on, or a future? You said you're working on this film, so I guess just when this film comes out.
Yeah, I mean, I could plug my short, which we're going to put out soon, Hermanos,
Yes.
which is a film I did right before the pandemic and then finished it during the pandemic. But it was inspired by real stories during the immigration crisis at our U.S.-Mexico border. But yeah, that's a love project of mine. So I'll just put that out there. It'll be on Vimeo soon. But mostly just thank you, Gina. Thank you for having this podcast. I love listening to you, and I feel honored that you would think I would have enough to say. It was just really amazing to talk to you and to be interviewed by you in this setting. I know you and I can do this all day, any day, but yeah, it's a pleasure.
Oh, I love you so much. And
love you too.
I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your time getting grounded and being out in nature in Tahoe. Hi, friends. If you've been enjoying Spaces Between, please take a moment to subscribe, and leaving a review is the cherry on top. Thank you so much, and I look forward to connecting with you next week.